Hello, Nate. You are up first, sir.
Hey, what's up, Bart?
How's it going? Now, I will say that I'm going into this call or this hand almost entirely blind. I know that you have pocket nines, but I didn't, obviously I trust Nate. It's going to be a good call. He said that what it sort of had garnered a lot of discussion over in our CLP Discord. And he just had texted it to me today. And I was like, well, I got a slot. You want to come on the call-in show? So let's do this thing. So give us the setup here, Nate. I assume that this is sometimes you play in a private game too. So is this in Cincinnati or is this actually?
This is in Cincinnati, but it is a private game, not in the casino.
All right. So it's in Cincinnati. It's a private game. And what's the setup here? Like, what game are you playing?
This is 5-5, and we're 2,600 effective with just about everybody. People buy in for 2,500.
All right. So 5-5, 2,600 effective. Okay.
All right. And we're in the low jack with 9 of diamonds, 9 of hearts.
All right. So hero in the low jack, 9 of diamonds, 9 of hearts. Okay.
All right. So I open at 20. The hijack, the cutoff, the button, and both blinds call.
Hijack, cutoff, button, and both blinds.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like a pretty good game.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of these spots. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be 6 ways. My God, 120. You ever size up pre-flop in this game, though, too, just because of the action you get?
I size up as I get later in position to like 25 and 30.
Okay. Yeah, this is sometimes a little bit of a tricky spot for some people when they go super multi-way with a pair that, obviously the chances are a very good chance. I don't know exactly the odds off my top of my head that at least one overcard's going to come. And you got to play it kind of straight up when there's this many people. Like if it was like, say you only got 2 callers and, it comes out like Jack Deuce 3 or something like that. Sure, you might continue, but you really shouldn't overcall in a spot like that. But once, you've got 4 or 5 people in there, like if it goes bet and call, like if you check and it goes bet and call, you pretty much have to be done with it. Because again, it's different than actually connecting with the board. Like if you had raised with like 7-8 and the board came out like Jack 8 Deuce. With 7-8, if you're behind to a Jack, you've got 5 outs to improve. With a pocket pair, you only have 2. So you actually have to defend less down to a flop bet. So, all right, $120 here to the flop.
Yeah, and on the flop, we get 8 of spades, 3 of spades, 2 of diamonds, and it checks to me.
Wow, so you actually do flop an overpair here. 8 of spades, 3 of spades, deuce of diamonds. So there is no overcard. The blinds check to you. And, I mean, your hand needs protection. I mean, I certainly would be betting most of the time here. The times that I might check might be with like aces sometimes, but it's still in a game like this where I get so many callers. I just feel like, I mean, I know it's not connected in such a way where there are many straight draws and stuff, but these guys seem to be over V-pipping. So by default, I'm usually betting a fair amount here for value.
Yeah, and that's fair. I decide to check evaluate with the possibility of check raising.
Check raising. Interesting.
Yes.
Because you think that this game is such that somebody will say like bet call with 8x or bet call with like 7-7 or bet call with a flush draw for sure, right?
Right, exactly.
Now it's interesting because you have 3 people behind you. So I would imagine if you were in the low jack or the cutoff, you would probably not plan on check raising because there'd be less people that give you the opportunity to bet, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So you're checking here because you've got 3 people behind you. Okay. So
right.
Not a play that I would make like a ton, but it makes sense why you might throw this in here. Okay.
All right. So I check hijack, who's next to act.
Yep.
Bets 50. Folds to the big blind who calls, and it's back to me.
So the hijack, who's next to act, which just inherently is a little bit stronger than the cutoff or the button betting, just because he's got 2 people to his left. He bets, the big blind calls. The big blind obviously can be pretty wide. Probably the big blind's going to be I mean, if there ever is any type of 2 pair here, he's probably going to be raising off with some of the time. So I guess if your plan was to check raise, why not, right?
Yeah, that's what I do. I check raise to 300.
Okay, so Hero goes to 300 which is what, like about a pot-sized bet, right?
Yes, close to it.
Okay. And you guys are deep, by the way. We start 2,600 effective. All right. So you check raise to 300. Uh-huh.
And hijack tank calls and big blindfolds.
Hijack calls and big blind folds. So hijack is next to act and calls. So hijack's next to act and calls, and then obviously the big blind here folds. So do you think, I don't know anything about this hijack, but you think that it's probably more likely that the hijack has a flush draw than like a hand like 7-8? Because he's got to worry about the big blind behind him, right? Like if he bet off with like a hand like even ace-8 or 7-8, I don't know if he's making that call to your check raise, right, on the flop.
Correct. I put him on a lot more flush draws than anything else here.
Okay. Not more flush draws. Now, some people in the chat saying nice overplay. It's not really an overplay if he thinks that he's going to bet call with flush draws and he thinks the hijack would 3-bet off 10s plus, right?
Right.
Where people will sometimes get lost here, though, is they think, well, again, I actually had a guy who emailed me this question. I said, if you ever make a raise or a bet where when you get called, you're like scared, you've done something wrong. And I'm talking about to the initial better, not somebody who like cold calls in between. So the fact that he called isn't necessarily scary. You just think he's got like a flush draw. I mean, I assume you're going to be betting on most non-spade turns. Now, you might get into some awkward situations if overcard non-spade turns come and like the guy, happens to hit top pair, but, so be it. 650 on the flop. Looks like the pot's 770.
Yeah, I had, right, correct.
770. Okay. All right.
And 770 in the turn, we get the 9 of spades.
The 9 of spades. Wow, that's interesting. You hit a set now, but you still think there's a good clump of flush draws, right, in the guy's range.
Correct.
Yeah, and Hammer J. Helmer saying flop check raise is way underused. Yes, I assume he's talking about flop check raise as the pre-flop raiser. We've done episodes on that, Nate. I don't know if did you cover that specifically too one time?
Yes.
Yeah, was that in a video or a podcast?
It was one of the first podcasts that you did that I helped work on.
Okay, about pre-flop, being the pre-flop raiser and like check raise C betting, basically. As well.
Yeah, and especially in extreme multi-way spots like this.
Right, because if you bet, and the reason for doing that, and maybe even, I don't know if you thought about this with 9-9 because it's so vulnerable, is you can get, it's almost like we use this term combo bet. And I'm not saying that you're not getting weaker, you're not getting better to fold and weaker to call necessarily, but what you end up doing is, and that's a little bit counterintuitive because you get weaker to call in the form of draws and better to fold, but you're getting like a bunch of hands that have a bunch of equity maybe against you just to fold out, as opposed to if you just started with some sort of small bet, right? And then you get like 3 or 4 callers.
Right, exactly.
All right, so I would imagine this is going to be reflected here with the check.
Yeah, and I'm going to check to him.
Yeah, all right, so hero checks.
And then he bets 350. And I just call, but I don't think there's any merit to anything else.
No, I think that at this point you do have to call. So hijack bets 350. Hero calls. And now you guys put in 700, so it's 1470 here to the river. And like I often will like to do here, Nate, I'm always thinking about, what might happen if the river, say, for example, comes out with a board pair, because what's interesting here is that unlike some other high cards that might, like for example, even if it was like a king or an ace or a queen or something like that, your hand is really, really disguised because a lot of people don't take this line with 9s. And that's good because if the board pairs here, you don't have to worry about a guy like checking behind, I don't think, with a flush. And maybe he'll continue on with like whatever bluff or something like that. Whereas if it was like a king of spades and then, you check called and the river paired the board, some frightened guys might check behind. But if the board pairs here and you've got 9s full, I mean, that's going to be a great, great hidden hand, I feel like.
Right. And yeah, that makes sense. And this is what the biggest discussion was on Discord, was how to best proceed from here. We got 1470 in the pot.
Yep.
We get the 2 of hearts.
Oh, there you go.
Pairs the board.
2 of hearts pairs the board. And it looks like, so you guys have put in 650, just a little under 700. So I mean, you probably have something like 1950 or so left in your stack, something like that, right around there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
I mean, here's the thing. Like I just said, I mean, like I said, this is such a hand that's kind of played like in a deceptive manner that I think it makes sense to go for a check raise. I mean, I think all flushers are going to bet. Now, you can go back and forth with this and say, well, if a guy, if he's going to fold to a check raise, like if I check and he bets like 600 and then I jam and he's going to fold, can I get more value by coming out and betting? There is that argument, but who's to say that people are going to bet fold here to a check raise? And again, Nate played the hand sort of, I would say, in somewhat of a deceptive manner that I almost feel like you'll get less folds here if you can pull the check raise off, as opposed to if the turn was, like I said, the king of spades or the ace of spades, where someone gives like more credit for like pocket aces, pocket kings. It would make sense to me here to go for a check raise unless you have some reason to do some sort of crazy like upfront like bet.
No, if he was going to lead, what size would you lead?
Well, I mean, I was always thinking huge, right? If you thought that you were going to be able to get in a bet 3-bet with like a reverse block, I know that's a term that we have in our CLP definition. Of course, a reverse block is like a situation where you're trying to put in what looks like a block bet, like of like 300 or something, to try to induce a raise, right? So you can bet 3-bet. But I don't like to get cute without the, it's just one of these things where, oh God, if you try to reverse block for 300 and the guy just calls with like a queen high flush, like if he doesn't have the nut flush here and you reverse block him, he might just call. You know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly.
And that's why if I were to bet, I would take a very large sizing.
Okay, so in my mind, I thought if I had a hand like, say, aces with the ace of spades,
Uh-huh.
and thought he had a flush draw here, or I mean a flush here, I could lead very large and possibly get a fold.
From a flush from up front?
I was thinking that. So I could be off my rocker.
I don't know, but I mean, if that's the case, then you don't want to lead with your hand that beats a flush, then do you?
Well, I don't want to lead large.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like if you, but I don't know. I was thinking that you were going to say, well, I had the ace of spades. Like I might try to pull a bluff here because I know the guy doesn't have the nut flush.
Right. I mean, exactly.
As a check raise, as a check raise though, not as just a lead,
Yeah, no, that makes sense too.
So what did you do?
I actually led here for 750.
I mean, I'll call it out, Nate. I mean, just like any other caller, I would not. I'm not a huge fan of this play. I'm not a huge fan of this play at the end. I think I would either go for a check raise or lead much, much larger. Again, maybe you can make a case for getting cute with a reverse block, but that would probably be my third option. I don't think I would take a half pot sizing here. I just think now the sizing's so large here, it would just be a disaster if like the nut flush just calls. You know what I mean?
Right.
By the way, like he could have like a set of threes, right? Or something like that. I mean, that's great. You're going to get all the money in, but.
Yeah, I assume no matter what I do here, any boat over boat, we're just getting it all regardless.
Right. So. Set of threes, set of eights. All right. So you bet 750.
Yeah. He tank calls with queen jack of spades.
So there you go. All right. So that's obviously to be expected, right? So button call. I mean, if you told me his hand, I would say he's going to call. Button calls with queen jack of spades. So do you regret the sizing on the river? Do you regret not going for a check raise? Do you regret not going large? Do you regret not going for a reverse block?
So in real time, I was thinking he would check back a fair amount of flushes because
really
people think I don't want to see a board pair. Now, I think he's betting all nut flushes, right? So I tried to weigh how often he has a nut flush versus a lower flush, and that's why I went with the lead. But this is what the debate on Discord was about. There was a fair amount of people who wanted to check raise, a fair amount of people who wanted to lead large or block. Everybody was all over the place.
Reverse block.
Reverse block, correct.
Now, why do you think, like, what is there anything in this hand that gives you information about, like, how would you ever know if he has the nut flush or not, though?
I wouldn't. I was just weighing combos of what he has. Like, obviously,
because if he's playing any ace X suited, right? Any ace X suited holding,
right?
There's going to be more combos of nut flushes, right? I mean, if you take out, let's say he 3-bets with ace king and ace queen suited.
Yeah, well, I kind of assumed he's 3-betting all the Broadway ace X suited.
All right, so that's 1, 2, ace 10 through ace king is 4. And then, so then you've got like ace 9 sort of down through ace deuce, which is like 6 or 7. And then you got to count the Broadway combos, what king, queens, if that doesn't 3-bet. Obviously, you can count. It just still appears that there would be more nut flushes just totally at random.
Right.
Unless you're saying that he might start to raise off the wheel combo draws on the flop, like ace 4, ace 5, then that takes some of that out.
And that was part of the thought process too. I thought any of the combo draws would raise, which obviously I was wrong because he did have a gutter to a straight flush and didn't raise. So.
And another thing that somebody points out too is that some people might check back queen jack of spades scared of the nut flush, but then again, it would be so strange, I think, Nate, for you to, I mean, would you play the nut flush draw as a check raise check on the turn? Check call, check raise check call. It's just weird,
Definitely
right?
Not.
Yeah. That's a good one though, Nate. So was there a consensus over there on CLP Discord about what
it was
do?
Very split, and I do wish I would have led more like 1,000 or something instead of 750. I thought that might be more optimal, but maybe in hindsight I should have check raised. It was a spot everybody was pretty much torn across the board on. Lots of different opinions.
Well, the thing, the argument against check raising is you have to have two things that happen, and you can look at this as like a percentage thing, right? You have to have the opponent bet, number one. Let's say he bets like 80% of the time, and then you have to have him call too.
Correct.
So even if it's like let's say that he bets 80% of the time and calls 80% of the time. Okay, it's just conditional probability.
Right.
He's only going to bet call 64% of the time. So you could look at whatever size that you're looking at and then multiply that by 64%. It's a little bit complex because you get the money in for the bet, but you know what I'm talking about, how you could do this out versus just upfront betting and saying, oh, I think he's going to call up to say 1,200 all the time. And you could come out with a situation where you could say it's more profitable just to bet whatever amount from upfront, you know?
Yep, that makes sense. And that is what went through my head was not so much will he bet as what will he call after he bets.
Yeah. All right. Awesome call, Nate. Thank you very much. Again, Nate did our solve for live pre-flop charts, which was a lot of like live no locking. And he's been a great contributor to Crush Live Poker. Thank you very much, Nate.